I think we're starting. No, it's been live streamed. Welcome everybody. This is one of 5 parallel sessions. We are titled The Right to the Right House, and we'll try to tackle that particular circumstance, the right to housing, and constrain it into one, the possible role that academia, general thinking and forward thinking can have in somehow making sure that that is definitely a right, and expanding or being consequent with that right, expanding it towards the right to the city and debating the city as the main unit of governance for social and ecological issues, which are actually probably the same, and finding, posing some questions to the right, to the right house, of course, regarding land use, because the right to the right house is not exactly the right to own, it's not the right to property, it's not exactly the right to live in a world where property is public or private. It can be collective, it can be shared, it can be common. So we set up these 3 kind of tracks that hopefully will organize our debate. And I was just bringing to collation very recent news that I think can reverberate with this discussion. Now, last Sunday in German elections, Berlin approved in referendum the acquisition to a sizable stock of public housing that had been acquired by speculators and being consolidated. So finally, a referendum stick to a constitutional right that implies that property has a responsibility. And so I think it gives a lot of food for thought and a lot of hope for architects, activists, administrators, and users, I guess, and citizens at large, that we can start addressing these questions. So without further ado, I would ask our contributors to help us build up this debate, and I would pass the word to Aitor.
Well, good afternoon. Thanks, Joaquin. I'm going to try to keep this short. 5 ideas. First one, I think nowadays the struggle of certain groups or between certain groups for housing is more visible than it was before. And we could simply say that the bad guys are winning, but that would be just simplifying by not assuming our fair share of responsibility on this thing. Perhaps bad guys are winning because good guys, so to speak, are not doing what we have to do. I think there's one big problem, which is the access to means, to technical resources, and to funding. And the example Joaquin just gave, it's an example of that. There are some actors that have the capacity to get access to the means, to technical resources, and to funding. In Portugal, we have now a more strong public policy, and now they say we have funding to solve all the problems of housing in the country until 2026. But what we don't have is technical resources, or I will put this in a different way. People who need badly housing solutions do not have an easy access to the technical resources, and these technical resources are needed to get the funding they need so that they can build the housing solutions they need. And the problem does not stop there. The problem is that the technical resources we have are not focusing on the issue of the right house. They are focusing on the issue of the house we can afford as a society. And what does this mean? I think everyone is getting a little bit paranoid about not coloring outside limits. So many municipalities are not trying to give houses to certain groups, and I'm thinking of Roma people, for instance. Some institutions are trying to, how to say this mildly, to be very strict, too strict with the rules that we are using in order to get access to the funding. So we are not talking about the right house. We are not talking about public space. We're not talking about the differences between different territories. We are talking about meritocracy, what poor people have to prove in order to get something, which is more or less similar to a house. So last ideas. I think that public power, public debate, and public framework are not being useful to create a common ground, or at least a ground which works for everyone. It's working better for once, and it's working not as good for another. And just giving the example of the academia and getting back to the idea which I started with, I think that we should think about what would be the position in which we can have more impact. Because in the academia, we are used to talk about public policies, we talk about architects, we talk about city, we talk about owners, we talk about tenants, but we not deal with public policies, we not deal with funding, we don't deal with city, we not deal with owners, with tenants. And it's a big difference dealing with and talking about. And I think that we have to find a public space or a common space so that we can work together with the people who have the problems and don't have the means to get the means to solve the problem. And I think that those were the 5 main ideas that I wanted to share with you.
I would, we still have 1 minute, but maybe we can go faster and come back in the end. Katerina, I would pass you the floor.
Hello, everyone. I'm not a practitioner, so first off, I think I want to thank Aitor for the intervention just now, and then probably everyone else that's going to speak after him, because this is very helpful for me. I am a researcher of architectural history, so that's necessarily going to be the basis of my position here. I've focused my work on housing forms and politics in that moment surrounding the Portuguese revolutionary period. And this is a period during which there was major public investment in housing. This was also a period during which a large set of different housing policies interacted with each other. They tackled different issues, and they had different types of property, different types of development, different levels of participation. And if this was not exactly made in this perspective of the right to the right house, it at least revealed this understanding that different situations require different solutions. And so I think this period is in itself a very interesting period to study and understand when we are trying to figure out what can be done today and what solutions can we try to make housing conditions better for all. Because in reality, a lot has been done before. But there is something else about this work that really struck me while studying this period. And that is how even before the overthrowing of the dictatorship in 1974, there was so much work being done being put into studying all the possible solutions for a problem that didn't really have space to be tried at that time period in history. And then everything that was achieved after 1974, it had been, it's long in thinking, it had been thought before, and it could be implemented then because the correlation of forces have been transformed, and also because there was this overwhelming popular organization around this issue. So this is my first point, and the second is that I have to admit that we're in this event that is called Question of Housing, and I am very agreeable to Engels' fundamental conclusions in his essays on the housing question. That is that there is no right to a house in our current mode of production, and also that the solutions that were proposed at this time could not work because they didn't really get the problem right. So they didn't get the problem right because the housing crisis is not really a housing crisis. It isn't even really a crisis. This was Engels' ultimate conclusion. The housing crisis is not an accident, it is necessary for the functioning of the system. We can see this today. Engels got that analysis right, but at the same time, in 1872, it could not predict how the housing crisis would evolve exactly. For example, it did not predict that this connection that he saw between facets of capital, like industrial and land capital, has also historically been a contradiction between their immediate interests, that they are not the same. Okay, I call it last, but to wrap this up, Engels didn't see that the temporary resolution of this contradiction could be undertaken by forces that were exterior to the market. He didn't foresee the welfare state that through the mid to the late 20th century, all across Europe, when the articulation of favorable economic conditions that were associated with the post-war rising of profit rates, and simultaneously the rising of workers' movements, and that is very important, made it possible to see that the mass construction of public housing, but also development of many other things like public health, labor laws, and other social guarantees that we have today, even though we have lost them a little by now. And now, really, to wrap this up, I think it is useful to bring these two ideas together. First and foremost, because the housing crisis doesn't stand on its own, and that is a very important idea to keep in mind. But what history has proven here in Portugal, well, in what I studied, but surely in so many other cases, is that we need to talk about land and property rights and public housing policies to address the inadequacy of existing housing conditions. But what we call the housing crisis, and this is the new European Bauhaus goes south. So many of us are from countries which have, for the most part, seen the development of productive forces come to a halt. And so in this situation in particular, the housing crisis cannot be seen and compartmentalized as something that stands on its own. I'm really finishing. And so in this sense, what my work taught me and what its articulation with Engels taught me is that we should act directly on the city and tackle specific housing issues, and do this in every way that we can, and seizing every little favorable condition. But the construction of a solution, a real solution for the right to house, for the right to a house before the right to the right house, it is much wider. And I want to stress that, for example, it is not just a urban problem that concerns urban practitioners. And that, for example, labor movements are also movements for the right to the right house. And I think this is my main point.
I think we should just go the first round and then come back with energy. Dimitra, I think.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for being with you. It's a very nice company, let's say. I am an architect and an academic as well, so I will take advantage of this and I'm talking about the point of view of an academic. Starting from the basis of how academic institutions can improve public housing policies corresponding to local needs. I will take the view that a better future can be based, among others, of course, on architectural design. It's a very provocative position. Architecture, as I heard before in the main keynote speaking of the president of the Portuguese Board of Architecture, he said that architecture can transform crises into opportunities. So I find it a very interesting position. So I totally agree, because I believe that through design, we can solve the emerging problems of housing in any period. We can introduce affordable, attractive, and innovative paths of planning and sustainable design. We can propose new methods of construction and operation principles based on cooperation and holistic procedure. As an academic, of course, we have responsibility to teach students. So our duty has to be, of course, to improve students' awareness, interest, and knowledge, I will say, about the issue of public housing, which is fundamentally transformed in nowadays, as we know, everybody, applying a holistic approach and solutions. In our curriculum, in the curriculum of our school, the School of Architecture in NTUA in Athens, we have several courses related to the topic of housing and public housing. We are running through these courses through the undergraduate and to postgraduate studies. Those courses are related either to a theoretical direction, underlining environmental, economical policies anywhere in Greece and abroad, and their implication in the questions of the right house. Through systematic bibliographical researches, publications to review, grounded analysis, we identify dominant knowledge, let's say, as the key element shaping housing policy, highlighting strategic solutions and recommendations, and so on. On the other hand, we try to teach courses with design directions. We have courses with design directions exploring problems arise from the city, proposing urban design and housing projects for low-cost income people, etc., studying affordable housing, neighborhood regeneration as very crucial problems, disability and accessible housing, participatory inclusion, many aspects that can be related to the right of the right house. The projects stimulate alternative and creative solutions Try to integrate also sustainable building design, recycling methods and materials, and innovating construction and operational principles. Also, in our university, we introduce collaborative research programs and workshops to give directions to the design of low-cost housing, formulated innovative methods, which can affect local policies and, of course, urban space. Those experience and outputs we use to present to the community in many aspects. This information also can be available online in our website in an open source manual, contributing with this way to the global knowledge and commons regarding the design and the construction of the low-cost housing. So it's a question that we try to solve with this two kind of approach, and we have in mind every time that this problem has to be very well aware in the student's mind, in order to be aware and then to make this as a private or public designers in everywhere they try to go after the studies. This is my point for the time being, and we see if I can say anything else. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dimitra. I think without further ado, Federica, the floor is yours. Please unmute your microphone so you come to the center.
Hi everyone, thank you. Nice to meet you all. I'm a student actually. I'm doing my final thesis with the Professor Valentina Rolli, and actually I'm in France, and my thesis will be about the problem of socializing in the suburbs of Paris, so in the banlieue, in the Grand Ensemble. The fact I only want to speak about two things. The one is, from my point of view, one of the biggest challenge of social housing is understanding what are the best alternatives for people and show them actively, because getting people into process. Because often I saw that well-designed space is not enough. People have to feel part of something to take care of it. And in my opinion, students should be also part of this process, because we have to be actors in this process to do a better work when we will get architects. And the other thing is, the question from my point of view is, how can we solve problems that are political and social, that are in the social housing that we have in our cities, and by architecture? Because I think it's very easy to just project new social housing, because we already know what are the problem and how to solve it. But the question is, how can we solve the problem of the many social housing that we already have in our cities? Because, for example, I went into Grand Ensemble, and I saw that even in the social housing, that the public space, for example, are beautiful. There's many trees, there are many playgrounds for children, but you feel that there are social problems, because you feel that the person are just there is the ghettos. So there are persons that are from African, all in the in the same housing, so there are not mixing of people, and you can see it even if the space is beautiful. So it's not only a problem of the space, it's a problem about political, social, and many things, and we have to be part of this. And for me, this is the really problem and the really question. That's it. I just passed the word from my teacher because I think she will say many things than me, and thank you so much.
If I may, so how to socialize the housing that we already have, instead of, you know, how to make social housing would be a way of carrying the debate, if I may. And I will keep the ball rolling for the sake of, we are doing well, so we can have a nice fight in the end. Please, let's keep the schedule. Eva, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you. I'm Eva. I come from Zagreb. I do not work in academia. I am an architect, but I work in civil sector for the most part. I'm also an activist, and due to recent changes in political situation in Zagreb, I'm also currently sort of consultant for the deputy mayor for the property of the city. Mainly housing properties. So I will actually, as the question is, what can academia do? I can only answer it from the perspective where I stand. What can academia do to actually be a partner or be an actor in conversation about right to housing? Because up until now, in our situation, in situation of Zagreb, in situation of the school I went to, Architectural School of Zagreb, this school was not an actor, a subject in this discussion about right to housing. And especially it didn't play a role of a subject through not producing knowledge or producing or actually being a part of advocacy for certain aspects of right to the city or right to housing. These things started slowly to change, but started to change, I think, only on fringes through conversations like this and through some activities of people who work in this school, some activities that they did like outside of the school, helping civil society in fighting different kinds of speculation or lack of right to housing. So in my view, academia is there as to produce knowledge and also to advocate for different rights, say. So what we are from the outside seeing as lacking is production of research or the possibilities that the academia has to actually research the real living conditions and material conditions that people find themselves in, to research questions of public property or municipal property and its relations towards urban planning, which is kind of not being thought about. Federica mentioned before about, say, ghettoization of social housing. For us, like understanding of what ghettoization and gentrification is in terms of public policy that creates social housing, that produces this effect, is something that is unfamiliar to our academia conversation and especially to our students. So in terms of like understanding what municipal property means when you build public property, you have to understand what it means in terms of what the social effects it produces in order to plan according to, say, advocacy of right to housing or advocacy of more social justice in the city. So those are the things that, you know, the effects of tourism in our cities are also something that academia does not tackle for the most part. It does not actually base its conclusions also in public conversation on data. It is usually the conversations about housing are based on feelings or on like a common conversation that is happening around us. For example, you can hear people that are close to academia or in academia saying that why people who cannot afford to live in the city, why wouldn't they move out of the city? So these kind of situations can only, in academic terms, I think, be debunked by proper research and proper will to do this kind of research, but also to teach students beyond housing design into the way that housing is produced and what kind of property relations we have in our city, and what is, as I mentioned, the power of what we can control from the public and democratic realm, and that is the city-owned property. So these are the, of course, the things that I see that should enter into our academic discourse over here, since we don't unfortunately have it. Situation is different from city to city, from university to university, but in our region, mostly architecture is, or architecture education is mostly 99% based on design and based on struggling to understand why design is not enough. So yeah, with this, I will finish my input on academia question.
I would give the floor to Paula. 5 minutes complaining about how Lisbon needs, you know.
I think we can see it in Lisbon as we are working here as architects. It's something that is not only in Lisbon. That there's one of the main things that I want to say is that more than thinking about solutions and new theories and new questions and launching new questions, I think we already have, especially in academia, we have already lots of knowledge, and we have solutions in other places, like you started to say in Berlin. What we need is to have a change of mentalities. It's to have and to bring that knowledge to technicians, to politicians, and to everyone that also can reclaim their rights if they know what can they have right to. And I say that because in fact in Portugal we have the notion that we always think about public and private, for instance, and we see as common sense that we have public is for very poor people, is social housing, and we are in the last years trying to, has written about that, all other people are writing about that in newspapers. Public housing is not only social housing, so there's other ways, and there are other places where things are being done, and we have to keep bringing that up. And it's very important also for regular people, I say, for everyone to have that knowledge, because in fact we always in Portugal we have still that house is safety. We see it as our property. I have to have this because I don't know what will happen to me in the future. So even if we have the more houses for renting, I think we all agree that that could be also easier to know what is the right house, because the right house in this moment can not be the right house when you have kids. Then when the kids go out of the house, then the right house changes with time during your life. But here you buy a house for life. You buy a house for your kids. It's that safety. So that brings us to another question, because we see there's private, everyone knows it's public that we have, that's what I was talking about. And we still have another possibility, for instance, that is private, but not for profit. And we think about cooperatives, and we think about other co-housing, and but that brings us to collective. And that idea of collective is also something that we have to work on, because I want my house, I want my laundry, I want my big room to have one party one day at the year, but it's mine. And that is something that if we all, and I think academia has a very important role in that part, also to show to students so that they can show, and again, to show that there are other solutions and maybe they are better, and maybe people can start to understand if it works in Berlin, if it works in Paris, if it works in Barcelona, then maybe it can work for me, and then start to reclaim it. Because as we see in Lisbon, it's and we can see that also in these elections, the housing was one of the major problems, and public space was one of the major problems. And then we shift to a more right-wing president. So something is not working ideologically. This doesn't make sense. That's this ideology and that mentality that we have to work on. And I think it's sometimes when we work in Pedrógão, for instance, that we have short budgets with funding, but it's not for, we know who would live in that houses. We know the people, and it wasn't for us, that Roman people or abstract poor people. We had that difficulty to show that even with the short budget doesn't have to mean shorter quality, because then we enter also in the sustainability. Also, how if we have better materials, then the houses will last longer, and that is also a very important problem in Portugal. And to finish, I think that it's this main ideas as always to go together with everything that goes around the house, with public spaces, with transport, with transportations, with services. Because if we have better environments in most part of the people of the city, then people doesn't want everyone to go to the same place. We can use more space in the city if that has the same kind of quality in services and public spaces and everything. So, bye now.
Thank you very much. And Valentina, you are weighted with all the Sindaco di Bologna, and as you probably know, it's probably a generational problem, but there are some urban policies on heritage preservation and sustainability of common tissue that we revered, for a long time. So, just
yes, I know.
Just no, I just tell you though, just the memories of trying to share our admiration for all the older Scanavini plans for Bologna and all the typological research with the students, with the PhD students that I remember doing with Francisco Barata are still fairly fresh in my memory, and the way we miss such a good friend. Please, sorry, the floor is yours, Valentina.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm an architect, but I'm serving as a deputy mayor in Bologna since 2016, in charge for planning and environment. And also I'm a teacher of planning at the University of Bologna. So I feel strongly this difficulty of the two, and talking about are very different fields of action. So I will try to tell you something about my experience with these different two jackets and the point of view. I start with a consideration. In Italy, we do not know what is the right house because we do not have national policies on housing. We do not have, for example, an official number about how many new houses do we need, or we do not have an official housing policy for the whole nation, because the state transferred the competence for housing policies to the regions and to the municipalities, to local authorities since the 90s. So my experience as an academic, but also as a local administrator is very significant, because in fact it is local authority, the key player in the field of housing and housing policies. What about Bologna? Bologna is a municipality which has the habit of working together with the university, with its own university. You know, the link between university and the city is very strong, and perhaps the two reality sometimes merge. The one and the other are very, very connected. And in this administrative mandate, we founded a foundation which is called Foundation for Urban Innovation, which has the president who comes from the university and the director who comes from the municipality. And this is a way of working together. And one of the topic we approached was housing, and also housing for students in a specific way. So we made some research which were oriented to public policies in the cities. And I think this is the role for academia. It is not only a role on designing, on making new visions for new kind of spaces, but it is also an important role concerning policies and staying inside the processes, as Federica stated before. We also made a great municipal inquiry about a house, which is a very big problem in Bologna, because we have a lot of students, but also a lot of tourists. So we leave all the conflicts which are typical of such a city. And all these materials, the public inquiry, the academic studies, were collected in the new urban plan, which I was responsible of, and which starts to be the plan of Bologna today. So it is a great day, because it is the first day for the new urban plan. And in this plan, we tell the city that the right house for us is a house for rent, because we know that people need to have houses for rent and not in property. It must be a rent at a good price, of course, not for rent in the sense of speculation. And we ask all the private which make interventions in Bologna to guarantee a certain quantity of housing for rent to the municipality. This is one of the measures we adopted. But we also started to promote some public interventions with this idea of rent, with the idea of micro interventions in the existing urban fabric. So housing is strictly connected to regeneration, and with the idea of trying to experiment new social models. You know that Bologna is a city of cooperation historically, but we tried to move these models towards co-housing. For example, we established some public co-housing, and also we inserted in the urban plan a specific rule for enhancing also private co-housing, which we recognize as a public service. So what is the right house? It is a house which tries to respond to different need, to different requests, which is temporary. So it is a service more than a house. And it is also hybrid because a lot of people today work inside their house, they live in. The pandemic has shown us the importance to have such spaces which must be adapted to different uses. I don't know. These are my points for the moment.
Thank you very much. So I think Bruna and me, we are the audience, asking questions officially, So I'm switching into now from the audience some questions, and I'm getting all these questions from this,
but still, just give me half a minute, Joaquin, to ask the audience that are watching eventually to keep watching us and to keep reflecting on the topics that our speakers have reflected upon. And if you would like to do so, you can update your questions and comments at the NEBgS South platform, and we will look at them. So please do it.
So if I might, I was trying to, as the format of the event goes, I should try to do a 3 minutes summary of the proceedings further on. And I was trying to take some notes and because what was all the time in the back of my mind was an heritage question. Heritage is not what belongs to the few, is what we as architects make sure that belongs to the most. It's not a private patrimony. We call it in Portuguese patrimony because we reverse it. It's more or less like the housing question. Heritage is what we are able to make everyone feel like they belong or belongs to them, not that they own it. And this is a kind of, I think, a very simple reversal that is important from the empowerment all the way to understanding that a renter's market, it's way more fair and way more decent in terms of management, of not having all the fake promises. Catarina was evidently telling us that, of course, the crisis is necessary for the capitalist production of domestic space. And I meant every single word, no? The crisis is a function of domesticating the workers and the humble in a certain environment. And I assume that was one of the undercurrents. No, I thought, if I heard you correctly, you are explaining that we do need empowerment more than design, and we need to avoid the institutions trying to come up with the right poor. No, now they are being choosy with the kind of poor that is a real poor, or the good poor, or the right poor, or the deserving poor. No, which is as if there was some form of qualifying need, which is a very vicious form of insult and discrimination. So how, and thought that the belonging was definitely, in the HLM, in how Paula was calling for a sense of belonging that produces, that even some mixity and some spread of dignity of public space can produce. Because of course, it's not simply that poor people can't afford to move where the place is with the rents they can afford. No, that's why they are poor. They are limited in space, in time, in energy, all those new forms of poverty, to enhance the rage and have a way more open debate. Because communication's poor, that's why we call it empowerment, because humble people are trapped in vicious cycle of disempowerment, of not being able to reclaim what is theirs. If I'm making sense. And I was, thank you, Eva, very much. It is a very small but very sharp indictment. Universities are not meant to transmit knowledge. That's secondary education. Universities should produce knowledge. That's their responsibility. The same way property has responsibility. Academia is socially justified because it produces knowledge, not because it carries along, it transmits, it educates, it. What the heck? If we are not thinking and producing what we're trying to share, the students wouldn't need to go. Knowledge, stabilized knowledge, it's everywhere. Why the heck bother people and make them spend a lot of money and energy? Because, and that, I'm really thankful for that very simple indictment. Academia should produce knowledge. Otherwise, there's nothing they could share. Should sharpen the whole instruments and bridge. And it's very, I was always very curious, because what I learned studying urban renewal in Barcelona, Moneo summed it very well about this, Rafael Moneo. In Barcelona, architects were able to make politicians see the city through their eyes. That's how academia invented a whole new city. They became the frame. They start owning and being stakeholders in that discussion, which is very... and we also have, of course, Dimitra was proposing design solutions, evidently, which is the other part of the spectrum. On one side, we have design is not enough. On the other, we have less is enough, more or less, because less is less. So to call it enough, it's not exactly a form of empowerment. And we all have probably to deal with the problem of the new, which is what is being so challenging in every design solution. None of us believes that we are going to build new HLM, we still call it social housing. If I go back to some new, more recent readings of Engels, well, what Engels understood perfectly, it's not a social question, it's a political question. We all understood what communities were meant for, So I'm very, very curious to see how we are going to deal with these design solutions without new buildings. That would be a nice and very complex challenge. But I think happily we have questions, so I can stop, If we all disagree with my little sum, please, be vocal and I'll do another one.
Well, we have a question for Valentina. The question comes from Bruno Calhas, and he asks, Valentina talked about intervening within the urban fabric. What are the legal frameworks of those interventions? And there's a second question. Who owns them? Who develops them? How are they placed on the market? You are muted. Oh, yeah.
Yes. Okay. When I talked about this, I especially made reference to a plan which we called 1,000 Houses for Bologna, which is a public plan led by, it is like a public agreement which involves the municipality and the public agency for housing. So we made a sort of list of different kind of interventions, which are all led by the public and which involve different kind of properties in the different kind of sites in the city. And they are all regeneration projects, so they don't deal with new houses basically, but with the refurbishment of houses or the transformation of an ancient building into a housing building. This was a plan that we launched in 2019, so we are doing these interventions we're making, and the idea is of having a lot of small sites where we can make small intervention of public housing, which reflect the multiplicity of the demand of different kind of public housing, but also the idea that we don't want to have a very big, huge stock as it was in the past, but a small intervention in different part of the city. In this 100 homes, only 1,000 homes, sorry, only 150 are new houses in a free public plot. All the other are refurbishing or interventions of change of use. We have to say that urban regeneration is a main policy for the municipality, so we also ask to the private to do this. We don't authorize new construction in rural areas, so that also the private developers have the task to transform, integrate, regenerate existing dwellings and existing buildings.
Thank you, Valentina. Does anyone have a question?
Can I ask Valentina if you can just clarify this 1,000 houses for Bologna, those are public investment or private investment? And is it an investment into publicly owned property or?
It is public.
Also, I have a small question that relates to your earlier talk about you asking private investors to give some portion of housing units to the municipality. How does that work? Do they transfer the property, or is it just a question of you managing them?
I was not clear, perhaps. We have two different actions. In general terms, we made a public inquiry about housing in Bologna, and we do know that in the next 10 years, we need 6,000 homes for rent. This is our number in general terms. So they can be public or private, of course. To reach this number, we made a public program of 1,000. This is public, and this is led by the municipality with the public agency for housing. And we put the other 5,000 in the municipal new plan. which is currently the plan for Bologna. And in this plan, we ask to each developer to give the municipality a certain quantity of housing for rent at a price which is defined together with the municipality. So the program is both public and private, but 1,000 houses is public.
We have another question. Some of our speakers refer the connection between university and social society. I'm citing Eva here. And also the differences in the types of housing. And we see a lot of references to social housing to involving the society. Even when Dimitra speaks about the potentialities of design, she refers as well to social housing and participatory processes. So should we consider somehow that the future or the guarantees on the right to the house or the right to the right house rely on participatory processes, and how can we make people see the potential of their rights to reclaim the right houses for them? This is a general question.
I should answer, or somebody else? I don't know.
If you like, this is a general question, but if you like to start.
Okay, this kind of question is a very interesting question, because we all know that the participating is not a very new thing. It's a very old one. So there are methods, there are theories, there are many architects and theoretical speaking academics that have been involved with the participation in design. You, of course, all know Christopher Alexander about the very, very important books that he has write about this. We now starting thinking about this recent years, because we understand that during the problems that we all have in that era of crisis, of many crises that are all around us, we need to involve new methods, to be in part of new methods of facilitating the whole procedure. One of the methods is that one, and this one is more very, very close to the public. It's very close to the public demands. It's very difficult to be incorporated. We also know, of course, we can think about it, and we have in mind that we can proceed to this procedure, but it's not very easy to go through the whole procedure in order to propose and to design and then to construct or to finish that kind of construction. We also, if we heard before the lecture of that session, it was a lecture about this kind of design that they have been in Barcelona, and the architect present a kind of participation with the users. So, of course, it is something that we have to have in our minds, that we have to do this, but we try to do this in a better way that we can. It's not very easy if you try to do. First of all, we need the society can be informed and to understand how it helps and how it can use it, because I'm not sure that they can understand. Everybody can understand how important is this. So starting from this, we have to make step by step many crucial points in order to make the people, the society to understand of this kind of solution. That for me, it's a kind of example, it's a kind of experiment, but we can do it and we can try to do it. Thank you.
Does any of the other speakers want to add something to this?
I already spoke, but I should add something. I think that participation starts before design. It starts in a collaborative approach, and cities have a strong responsibility in enhancing this kind of approach in their public policies. So that people can be involved in a theme, in a question, in a target, even if designing activity has not begun yet. For example, we made a public inquiry on housing because there was the necessity to share some contents and feelings and problems in the public domain. And then when you arrive at the phase of designing, some contents are already shared and already acquired by people. But we have always to remember that the most fragile people do not participate and they do not have a voice. And so there is a specific responsibility for public when we speak about housing. I spoke about housing for rent, and we asked to private to build housing for rent. Yes, this is a good idea, but we know that for some kind of people, some low-income people, we can't offer this kind of possibility. We must think about public intervention, and we must always remember that they don't participate. So we must have an attention very specific to this problem.
I totally agree with you, because I'm sorry if you hear some kind of bells, it's a church next to me. Okay. It's a kind that this approach starts before the design. We actually ran a kind of questionnaire of 61 questions in order to make some improvements in a city center. And we ran this through the citizens of the area in order to answer in many questions that have been related to the whole procedure before starting designing anything, before starting thinking anything. The only thing that we have already think about is how to handle a kind of questions in order to have the proper answers and to fix a kind of solution ideas and guidelines for us to go to the next step. And we have, of course, a kind of participation in the first stage of design stuff.
I have to be a kind of, you know, the moderator, which I'm not very decent at. I hope you trust me to make a 3-minute impoverished sum of your contributions. I think we have to close to make sure that we all come together to a bigger discussion with the other panels. And I'll thank you very much for your contributions and your exchange. Thank you very much, Bruna, for all the care. You know? And hope we can continue this conversation, because surely, you know, it's not that the more we say, the less we do, but the more we say, probably the better we can make. So hopefully, you know, we'll go on. Thank you very much. You know? And see you in the